The chicken was done by 7:15. Betsey knew this because she always started it at 6:30, and it always took 45 minutes, and she had never once in 8 months adjusted the timing, even though the person she was cooking for had not been home by 7. 15 in longer than she could honestly remember. She set 2 plates on the counter anyway, pulled 2 wine glasses from the cabinet, filled one, left the other empty the way you leave a seat for someone at a table you're not sure they're coming to. The kitchen smelled like garlic and thyme. The dining table was clean. The overhead light was on, the warm one, not the bright one, because Chadwick always said the bright one gave him a headache after a long day. And somewhere between the man telling her that and the man barely coming home anymore, Betsey had kept the habit of turning on the warm one. She ate alone, cut her chicken slowly, watched the candle in the center of the table burn down a little more. Outside, Phoenix was doing its evening thing, the sky going all kinds of dramatic colors that nobody in the Southwest ever got tired of. Orange bleeding into purple, bleeding into the kind of dark blue that looked painted. When she finished, she wrapped his plate in foil. She opened the refrigerator. She placed it on the second shelf, the same shelf she always used, and closed the door. She did not look at it before she closed the door. There was nothing to look at. It was just a plate. She poured herself more wine and went to the couch and turned on a show. Something Korean, something with enough subtitles to keep her brain engaged, something loud enough to fill the corners of the room where quiet liked to settle in and get comfortable. Her phone lit up at 8:47. Running late. Don't wait up. She looked at the message for a moment. Then she put the phone face down on the cushion beside her and turned up the volume. The ER at St. Christopher's Medical Center in Phoenix was not a place where people were allowed to be slow. Betsey had learned this her first week as a new nurse 11 years ago, when an attending physician looked at her over a patient's gurney and said, "Nelson, in this room your brain moves faster than your mouth or you go home." And she had decided right then that she was never going home. She had been one of the sharpest triage nurses on the floor ever since. She walked into her shift the next morning the same way she always did. Coffee in one hand, badge clipped, sneakers already squeaking on the linoleum before she hit the doors. "Bed 4's been waiting 40 minutes, said the charge nurse, a tall man named Kwame who had the permanent look of someone managing 17 things simultaneously. "I see him," Betsey said, already moving. The man in bed 4 had a gash on his forearm from what he described as a home improvement incident, and what Betsey's 11 years of reading people told her was something more complicated. She cleaned and dressed it without asking him to explain himself, which was the thing patients never expected and always needed. She talked to him the way she talked to everyone. Direct, warm, no performance. By the time she was done, he was calmer than when she found him. Her colleague Portia fell into step beside her in the hallway. Portia was 41, had been an ER nurse for 14 years, and had the kind of face was constitutionally incapable of lying. "You look tired," Portia said. "I look exactly how I always look. You look tired in a new way." Betsey handed her a chart. "How's bed 7? Portia took the chart but did not look at it. "Chadwick come home last night?" "Portia, I'm just asking." He texted. Portia made a sound that was not quite a word. "He's building something," Betsey said, her voice even practiced. "You don't build something and make it home for dinner every night. That's not how it works." "You're not every night," Portia said. "You're any night." Betsey walked into the next bay. "Bed 7, Portia." Portia went to bed 7, but she looked back once, and the look said everything she had just decided not to say out loud. Chadwick Nelson had been promoted to CEO of Nelson Logistics 8 months ago. Before that, he had been VP of Operations, and before that, Regional Manager, and before that, the man who used to leave handwritten notes tucked into the medicine cabinet, small things. Sometimes just a word or two, sometimes a sentence that made Betsey read it twice and carry it through her whole shift. She still had some of them. In the back of the nightstand drawer, under a phone charger she no longer used. She was not sure why she kept them. She was not sure she wanted to think too hard about why. The promotion changed something. Not immediately. There was a month or two where he was just excited, calling her from the office, telling her about the meetings, the decisions, the weight of it. She had listened. She had been proud. She had made reservations at his favorite restaurant in Scottsdale to celebrate. Then the calls got shorter, then less frequent. Then the dinners started getting the foil treatment. Then the notes stopped. And she realized only when she opened the medicine cabinet one morning, looking for aspirin, that she couldn't remember the last time she'd found anything in there besides aspirin. She told herself it was the adjustment period. Every person who stepped into a new role needed time to find their footing. She knew this. She was a reasonable woman. She kept setting 2 plates. She had lived next door to him for 3 years and still did not fully know what he did. Hanju Lee, that was his name. She had seen it once on a piece of mail that blew into her yard during a dust storm. She had picked it up to return it and read it without meaning. To the way people do, Hanju Lee. The house to her left, large and modern and so quiet it sometimes felt like nobody lived there at all. Except someone did. She knew this because of small things. The garden on the side of the house that someone tended every Sunday morning. The running shoes by the front door that got replaced every few months. The single light in the upstairs window that came on around midnight and stayed on for exactly an hour before going dark. She had spoken to him 4 times in 3 years. He had carried her garbage bin back from his yard after a dust storm. He had sent a plumber to her house after a pipe burst. She had not asked him to, and she had never figured out how he knew. He had carried her groceries to her door one night without being asked and left without being thanked. And once, just once, she had driven past him as he was on a phone call in his driveway speaking Korean, and he had stopped mid-sentence and watched her car until she was inside. She thought he was just private. She had no idea what private actually looked like for a man like him. If you're already feeling this story, drop a comment, hit like and subscribe. The Friday Chadwick left for Dallas started like every other Friday. He came downstairs with his suitcase already packed. He had packed it the night before, which she only noticed because she had gone to the closet for an extra blanket and saw it sitting there, neat and ready, like it had been waiting, and he had coffee standing up at the kitchen counter, scrolling his phone, suit already on. "Flight's at 11, he said. "I know, you told me Wednesday. Should be back Sunday evening. Okay." He looked up from his phone then, briefly. The way someone looks up when they want to seem present without actually stopping what they were doing. "You'll be all right?" She was a 34-year-old emergency room nurse who had managed a 4-car pile-up intake on a Saturday night with 2 staff members out sick. She looked at her husband. "I'll manage." He kissed her on the cheek. His mouth was warm and familiar and already somewhere else. She heard the front door close. She heard the car back out of the driveway. She stood at the kitchen counter with her coffee and looked at the space where he had just been standing. The kitchen was very quiet. She got ready for her shift. It was a long day, the kind of day where the ER doesn't slow down until after 9 p.m., and by then your feet have stopped, sending complaints because they've given up entirely. Betsey worked through it the way she always did, methodically, quickly, with the kind of humor that kept the energy in a room from tipping toward despair. There was a woman in her mid-40s in Bay 3 who was convinced she was dying of something the internet had diagnosed her with. Betsey listened to all of it, checked all of it, and then sat on the edge of the bed and said, "Mrs. Calloway, I need you to close that browser tab and never open it again, because WebMD has never once told anybody they had gas and moved on. It's not in their business model." Mrs. Calloway laughed so hard she forgot to be scared. Portia caught Betsey in the break room at 7 p.m. "You got plans tonight? Couch, wine, subtitles, Chadwick's in Dallas until Sunday." Portia poured herself coffee and leaned against the counter. "You could come over." Malik made jerk chicken. "I already have chicken at home." "Betsey." "Portia, I'm fine. I'm actually..." She paused. She looked at her coffee cup. Then she said something she had not planned to say. "I'm actually a little relieved he's gone, and I don't know what to do with that." The break room was quiet for a moment. Portia said carefully, "How long have you felt that?" Betsey shook her head once, not in denial, more like she was shaking the thought back into a drawer she wasn't ready to open. Don't psychoanalyze me, I have 4 more hours. Portia let it go. But she watched Betsey walk back out onto the floor with the look of someone storing information for later. Betsey got home at 11:40 p.m. She changed out of her scrubs, poured the last of the open wine, and sat down on the floor in her entryway. Not the couch, the floor. Her back against the front door, legs stretched out, wine glass in hand. Sometimes, after a long shift, the couch felt like too much of a destination, and the floor was just where she landed. She sat there in the quiet of her own house and thought about what she'd said to Portia. Relieved. She examined the word the way she'd examine a symptom. Where was it coming from? What did it mean? What was the underlying condition? She didn't finish the thought. She finished the wine instead. Outside, a car pulled up next door. She could see the headlights sweep across the frosted glass panel beside her front door. She heard a car door close. Then nothing. She didn't think about it. She was too tired to think about anything. What she didn't know, what she had no way of knowing, was that Han Julie had gotten out of that car, walked toward his front door, and stopped, because he could see her outline through the frosted glass, sitting on the floor, back against the door, not moving. He stood on his front path for a moment. His driver, Shin, was still in the car. Shin said nothing because he had learned over 4 years of working for this man that silence was usually the correct response. Han Julie walked to his own front steps. He sat down. He did not go inside. He stayed there for a while, just sitting in the warm Phoenix night, while the woman on the other side of the frosted glass sat on her floor. He didn't know if she knew he was there. She didn't know he was there. But she fell asleep against her front door that night feeling, for reasons she couldn't explain, slightly less alone than she had all week. Sunday came and went. Chadwick texted at 6 p.m., flight delayed, might be late, and then again at 9 p.m., exhausted, going to crash early, talk tomorrow. And she read both messages and put her phone back down and watched her show, and did not feel the way a wife should probably feel when her husband doesn't come home. She felt nothing she could name. Monday morning, she wrapped the untouched plate from Friday, she had forgotten it in, the refrigerator, and threw it away. She stood over the bin for a second after she dropped it in. Then she washed her hands and got ready for work. It was a Tuesday, 12 days after the Dallas trip, when Felicia walked into her bay, late 20s, well-dressed in the way of someone who took care about how they presented themselves. Minor car accident, a fender tap at a red light, more shock than injury. Betsey ran through triage efficiently, checking her over, asking the right questions. Felicia answered them all, but her eyes were somewhere else entirely. She had the look of a person whose body was in the room, but whose mind was 3 hours behind, replaying something. Betsey recognized that look. She saw it in the mirror sometimes. "You doing okay beyond the physical stuff?" Betsey asked. Felicia glanced at her. "Yeah, sorry. Just long weekend. Where'd you go?" "Dallas, actually. Just got back." Betsey's hands kept moving, steady, professional. Her face did not change. But something behind her eyes filed the word away like a tab opening in the background of a browser, quiet and waiting. "Get some rest," she told Felicia when she was done. "You're clear." Felicia nodded and left. Betsey stood in the bay for 3 seconds longer than she needed to. Then she went to her next patient. She didn't say anything to Portia about Dallas. She didn't say anything to anyone. She went home that Tuesday evening and sat at the kitchen table with her laptop and opened Chadwick's shared credit card statement, the one they used for household expenses, the one she paid half of every month, without ever really scrutinizing it, because she had trusted him the way you trust someone you married and built a life with. She scrolled back 8 months. She was not looking for anything specific. She told herself she was just looking. The Dallas charges were there. Hotel, 2 dinners, a car service, all of it consistent with a business trip. All of it exactly where it should be. But there was a charge from 8 months ago, the month of the promotion, at a Scottsdale address she didn't recognize. A restaurant she had never heard of. On a Wednesday evening when he had told her he was working late, she clicked out of the statement. She closed the laptop. She sat at the kitchen table in the quiet house and pressed both hands flat against the surface like she was trying to feel whether it was solid. Then she opened the laptop again. The thing about being a nurse for 11 years was that you became very good at noticing what didn't fit. A patient who said they fell, but whose bruises told a different story. A medication list that didn't match the symptoms. Betsey was looking now. The second phone had appeared 8 months ago. She remembered because she had asked about it, and he had said the company issued it to executives for security purposes. She had accepted that answer the way she accepted a lot of things in the months after his promotion. Quickly, without pressing, because she was giving him space to adjust, and she thought that was what a good partner did. She found it that Wednesday evening in the pocket of a jacket he'd left, draped over the bedroom chair. She didn't go through it. She stood there holding it, turning it over in her hands, and then she put it back exactly where she found it. But she noted the brand, the model, the fact that it had no company logo on the case, just a plain black cover, the kind you bought yourself. She went to bed at a normal time. She slept badly. She got up and made coffee and set 2 plates and wrapped one in foil and went to work, and did not tell a single person what she was thinking. Portia found her in the parking lot after a shift that Thursday, leaning against her car with her face tilted up at the sky. Phoenix afternoon. Hot, the kind of heat that pushed back against you. "You've been quiet all week," Portia said. "I'm always quiet at work." "You're never quiet at work. You told a grown man this morning that his blood pressure was high because he was arguing with God about his diet and losing." "That's true, though." Portia stopped beside her. "Betsey, what's going on?" Betsey looked at the sky for another moment. Then she lowered her head and looked at Portia with the steady eyes of a woman who had already made a private decision. "If you saw something, not something dramatic, just something small, something that could mean nothing, would you sit on it or would you move on it?" Portia thought about that. "Depends what I was afraid of finding." "That's the thing," Betsey said. "I'm not afraid of finding it. I'm afraid of how unsurprised I'll be." Portia was quiet. Betsey pushed off the car. "I'll see you tomorrow." She drove home with the radio off. That Friday evening she was pulling grocery bags from her trunk at 10 p.m. She had worked a double and stopped at the store on the way back because the refrigerator was nearly empty. When she heard a car door close in the driveway next door, she registered it without looking up. She was on her third bag, the heaviest one, hoisting it up when she heard footsteps slow on the path beside her. "I have them," said a voice. She looked up. Han Julie was standing 2 feet away in a dark jacket, looking at the bags with the calm directness of someone who had already decided he was going to carry them before he spoke. He was holding what looked like a phone and a set of keys. He had clearly just gotten home. Himself, she stared at him for a half second. "I'm fine, I know," he said. "I have them." He picked up the 2 heaviest bags without waiting for her to agree. He walked to her front door. He set them down neatly on the porch and stepped back without making it a transaction, without standing there expecting acknowledgement. She came up the path behind him with the remaining bags. She looked at him. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once. He turned to go back to his own door. "Do you ever talk?" she said before she could stop herself. He paused, turned back slightly. There was something in his face, not quite amusement, but the space just beside it. "When I have something to say." She looked at him for a moment. "Fair enough." He went inside. She went inside. She put her groceries away in a house that was once again empty and quiet and smelled like nothing, because she hadn't cooked that night, and she stood at the kitchen counter, eating crackers and cheese for dinner, thinking about a man who carried her, bags without being asked and left without waiting to be thanked. It was not a thought she entertained for long. She had other things to think about. She opened the credit card statement again. The Scottsdale restaurant charge from 8 months ago had a name. She typed it into her browser. Small place. Nice but not formal. The kind of restaurant where people went on dates, not business dinners. She went back further in the statement. There was another charge at the same restaurant 2 months later. And again 3 months after that, 3 visits, same restaurant. always a Wednesday, always when he'd said he was working late. She sat with that for a long time. Then she picked up her phone and called the one person she knew she could trust not to react before she was ready for someone to react. "Portia," she said when it picked up. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me straight." "Always," Portia said. The television in the background went quiet. "The Saturday before last. You said you were in Scottsdale for Malik's cousin's thing." "Yeah. Did you see Chadwick?" A pause, long enough to be its own answer. "Portia, Betsey, tell me straight." Another pause, then quietly, "Yes. I saw him at a restaurant on Camelback. He was with someone, a woman. I didn't say anything because I didn't know what I was seeing, and I didn't want to." "What did she look like?" Portia hesitated. "I'm not asking to make myself feel worse," Betsey said, her voice completely level. "I'm asking because I need to know what I'm looking at." Portia described her, young, well-dressed, at ease with him in a way that was not professional. Betsey listened to every word. She said, Okay. "Betsey, thank you for telling me." She hung up. She sat at her kitchen table and did not move for 4 minutes. She knew it was 4 minutes because she was watching the clock on the microwave, and she gave herself exactly that long before she stood up, washed her face at the kitchen sink, dried it, and went to bed. She was not going to fall apart. Not yet. Not until she knew the full shape of the thing. 3 weeks passed. Betsey moved through them the way she moved through difficult shifts. One task at a time, head down, hands busy. She was not avoiding the truth. She was collecting it. There was a difference, and she knew the difference, and that knowledge was the thing keeping her steady. She had stopped setting 2 plates, not dramatically, not as a statement. She just stopped one evening, mid-reach for the second plate, and put her hand back down and got 1 plate and ate her dinner and watched her show. The second wine glass stayed in the cabinet. The warm light was still on because she liked it, not because of anyone's headache. Small adjustments, the kind only she would notice. Chadwick noticed nothing. He came home 2 or 3 nights a week now, always late, always distracted, always with the second phone face down on whatever surface was nearest to him. He ate whatever was in the refrigerator, standing up. He went to bed talking about logistics contracts she didn't ask about. He slept beside her like a man who had made peace with a version of his life she had never been shown. She watched him with the eyes of a nurse who had learned that what a patient didn't say was usually more important than what they did. She was waiting for the full picture. The full picture walked into her bay on a Thursday afternoon, wearing a white blouse and the face of someone carrying something too heavy to hold much longer. Betsey recognized her before the woman recognized her. The car accident patient from 3 weeks ago. Felicia. She had asked for Betsey specifically at the front desk. Quam had come to find her with a slightly puzzled look and said there was a woman in the waiting room who said she needed to speak to the nurse who treated her last month. Betsey went to the break room. Felicia was already there, sitting with her hands around a paper cup of water she hadn't touched. She looked up when Betsey came in, and something in her face shifted. Relief, guilt, something that hadn't decided what it was yet. "I'm sorry to just show up like this," Felicia said. "It's all right." Betsey sat across from her. "What's going on?" Felicia looked at the cup in her hands. "When I was here before, the day of the accident, I almost said something and I didn't. I've been thinking about it since. I kept telling myself it wasn't my business, but I can't." She stopped, pressed her lips together, started again. "I've been seeing someone. For 7 months, I'm in love with him, or I was. I found out something recently that I don't know what to do with, and I just..." She looked up. "I don't even know why I came here. I think I just needed to say it out loud to someone who wasn't in my life." Betsey waited. "His name is Chadwick Nelson," Felicia said. The break room went very still. Betsey sat with that name sitting in the air between them, and she did not move and she did not look away from Felicia's face, and she said carefully, "How long did you say?" 7 months. Felicia's brow pulled together. Do you know him?" Betsey looked at this woman, young, genuine. The distress on her face was real, not the distress of someone caught, but the distress of someone who had just found out she was the one who didn't have the whole story. Betsey could see it clearly. She had spent 11 years reading faces. She said very quietly, "He told you he was single. It wasn't a question." Felicia's face changed. The shift was slow, and then all at once, the way understanding moves. Her eyes went from confused to searching to something that was starting to crack at the edges. "What, Felicia?" Betsey said. "My name is Betsey Nelson. Chadwick is my husband." The paper cup crinkled in Felicia's hands. The break room was so quiet, Betsey could hear the ventilation system running above them. Felicia said, barely above a whisper, "He told me he wasn't married." "I know," Betsey said. He said he had never." Felicia stopped. Her hand came up to her mouth. "Oh, God!" Betsey stood up. She went to the counter and poured 2 coffees from the machine that nobody in the break room ever bragged about, but everybody used. She came back and set one in front of Felicia and sat down with her own. Felicia was staring at the table. "I didn't know," she said. "I need you to know that. I would never." "I know you didn't know," Betsey said. "How can you be this calm right now?" Betsey looked at her coffee. "Because I already knew something was wrong. I just didn't have your name yet." She looked up. "Tell me everything." Felicia looked at her like she wasn't sure she'd heard correctly. "Not to hurt myself," Betsey said, "because I need to understand the full shape of what he built. And right now you have half the picture and I have half the picture, and between the 2 of us there's a whole one." Felicia stared at her for a long moment. Then she started talking. She talked for 40 minutes. Betsey listened to all of it without interrupting. 7 months. The restaurant in Scottsdale. Betsey noted this without reacting. The trips, he said, were solo work travel. The second phone. Felicia had that number. The Scottsdale condo he had shown her once, driven her past, said it was an investment property he was managing. At that last part, Betsey put her coffee cup down very slowly. "He showed you a condo," she said. "He drove me past it, said it was his." "Address?" Felicia gave it to her. Betsey typed it into her phone notes without explaining why. Her face was so composed that Felicia kept glancing at her like she was trying to find the seam where the composure ended. "He let you sing Happy Birthday to him in April," Betsey said, reading back from what Felicia had told her. "Yes, his birthday is in November." Felicia's face went completely blank. Then something moved through it. Grief, humiliation, fury. All of it compacted into a single expression that lasted about 3 seconds before she pressed her hands over her eyes and made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and the opposite of one. Betsey watched her. Then, against everything that should have been possible in that moment, she felt it rise in her own chest too. The sheer audacity of a man who had let a woman sing to him in the wrong month, who had maintained 2 complete lives with such casual confidence that he had forgotten to keep the basic details straight. She laughed. She did not mean to, but she laughed, and Felicia heard it and lowered her hands from her face and looked at her, and then Felicia laughed too. The broken, exhausted, furious kind of laugh. They sat in the break room of St. Christopher's Medical Center laughing about a man who deserved neither of them. And it was the most honest either of them had been in months. That evening, Betsey sat at her kitchen table with her laptop, a yellow legal pad, and the condo address Felicia had given her. She was not emotional. She had been emotional in the car on the way home. 10 minutes of it, hands tight on the wheel, eyes dry because she was too tired for tears and too angry for them anyway. She had given herself those 10 minutes. And then she had pulled into her driveway and sat up straight and decided that feelings were for later and information was for now. She typed the address into the county property records database. Public record. Anyone could access it. She had never had a reason to before tonight. The condo on Via Solano was registered to a property management company called Meridian Sunset Holdings, LLC. She wrote that down. She searched the LLC, registered in Arizona 8 months ago, the same month as the promotion. She noted, her pen moving without pause. The registered agent was a legal firm in Tempe. The managing member listed was a name she didn't recognize. She wrote that down too. She sat back and looked at what she had. A shell company, a condo, 8 months. The same 8 months that Chadwick had started coming home less, sleeping beside her like a stranger. building something she had not been invited into. She turned to a fresh page on the legal pad. She wrote, "What is he building and who is he building it with?" Then below that she wrote, "And why does he need a company to do it?" She called Felicia the next morning. She had taken Felicia's number before they left the break room. Felicia had looked surprised when she asked for, and Betsey had said simply, "We're not done yet," and Felicia had nodded like she understood, even if she wasn't sure she did. "The condo," Betsey said when Felicia picked up. "Did he ever take you inside?" "Once. About 4 months ago. What was in it?" "Furniture. Nice stuff. A desk in the second bedroom with papers on it. He didn't let me look at anything, said it was work stuff. There was a safe in the closet. I only saw it because the door was open." Betsey wrote this down. "Did he ever mention the company name Meridian Sunset Holdings?" Silence. Then, "No, but, wait. There was an envelope on the kitchen counter that day. I remember because I moved it to set down my bag. It had that name on it. I didn't think anything of it." "Okay," Betsey said. "Betsey." Felicia's voice was careful. "What are you looking for?" "I don't know yet," Betsey said, "but I'll know it when I find it." She paused. "Are you all right?" A long exhale on the other end. "I keep picking up my phone to call him and then putting it down." "Don't call him," Betsey said. Not harshly, just clearly, the way she told patients not to put weight on a sprained ankle. "Not yet. Not until we know what we have." "Okay," Felicia said quietly. "I mean it. Okay." She was on her back patio that Saturday morning with coffee when she heard movement in the garden next door. She didn't look up immediately. She was reading through the LLC registration documents she had printed out the night before, making notes in the margins, cross-referencing dates. After a few minutes, she became aware that the movement had stopped. She looked up. Han Julie was standing in his garden about 20 feet away, holding a pair of pruning shears, looking at her with the calm attention of someone who had noticed something and was deciding whether to speak. She looked back at him. "You're up early," she said. "You didn't sleep," he said. She stared at him. "How do you know that?" "Your kitchen light was on at 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. She considered this. Another woman might have found it unsettling. Betsey, who had spent the last 3 weeks conducting her own quiet surveillance operation on her husband's life, found it more relatable than she wanted to admit. "Do you ever get tired of being quiet?" she said. He looked at her for a moment. "Do you ever get tired of pretending you're not?" The words landed in a way she hadn't expected. She looked at him, really looked at him, the way she hadn't allowed herself to in 3 years of brief encounters and careful non-attention. He was looking back at her with eyes that were steady and direct and carrying something she couldn't quite name. She looked back down at her papers. He went back to his garden, but he didn't go inside. He stayed out there, moving through his rows of plants with unhurried focus. And she stayed on her patio with her documents and her coffee. And neither of them acknowledged that they were both choosing to be outside in the same space at the same time. It was the longest they had ever been near each other without one of them leaving. When she finally went inside an hour later, she felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. She felt less alone. That Monday, Shin placed a folder on Han Julie's desk during their morning briefing. Han Julie ran his meetings. He and Shin worked through the week's business efficiently, methodically. Toward the end, Shin set the folder down and said, "There's a logistics company we've been considering for the northern supply route. Nelson Logistics." Han Julie looked at the folder without opening it. "The CEO's name is Chadwick Nelson," Shin continued. "He took the position 8 months ago. The company's numbers are clean on the surface, but there are some routing irregularities in the last 2 quarters that our people flagged. Third-party shipments moving through channels that don't match the official manifests." Han Julie was quiet for a moment. "What kind of third party?" Shin met his eyes. "The kind we don't do business with." The room was quiet. "There's something else," Shin said. He paused in the way he only paused when he was deciding how to frame something. "The CEO. His residential address on the business registration. It's the house on your left." Han Julie looked at Shin for a long moment. He said, very evenly, "Show me the routing irregularities." Shin opened the folder. Han Julie read through it without expression. But when he reached the third page, a network map showing the third-party routing channels and who controlled them, something shifted behind his eyes. Because the network on that page was one he knew, and the people who ran it were not people who tolerated loose ends. He closed the folder. "Drop Nelson Logistics from the consideration list," he said. Shin nodded. "And Shin," Han Ju-Lee looked up. "Pull everything we have on that network's current Phoenix operations. Everything." Shin picked up the folder. "How fast?" "Tonight." Betsey found the second LLC on a Tuesday night. She'd been following the paper trail from Meridian Sunset Holdings methodically, the way she worked a complicated case. Not rushing, not skipping steps, just moving through each layer until the next one appeared. The registered legal firm in Tempe had a publicly listed client roster on their website. She had gone through it name by name, cross-referencing against the dates and figures she had pulled from the shared credit card statement, the business registration records, and the notes Felicia had given her about the envelope on the condo counter. The second LLC was called Sunstate Capital Ventures, also registered 8 months ago. Also with a managing member whose name she didn't recognize, but the registered agent was the same Tempe law firm. 2 shell companies. Same law firm, same 8-month window. She pulled the property records for Sunstate Capital Ventures. It owned 4 properties in the Phoenix metro area. The Via Solano condo was one of them. She sat back in her chair. 4 properties. A logistics CEO salary, even a generous one, did not quietly absorb 4 Phoenix properties in 8 months without someone noticing, which meant either the money was coming from somewhere else, or it was being moved through somewhere else, or both. She wrote on her legal pad, "Where is the money coming from?" Then she sat there looking at that sentence for a long time. She didn't sleep well. She was up at 2 a.m., then again at 4 a.m., sitting at the kitchen table with the documents spread out in front of her, and a cold cup of coffee she kept forgetting to drink. By the time her alarm went off at 6:30, she had 3 pages of notes and the specific exhaustion of someone who had been thinking too hard in the wrong direction. She showered. She stood under the water longer than usual, hands pressed against the tile, letting herself feel the full weight of what she was looking at. Not the affair. The affair was almost beside the point now, which was a sentence she would not have believed 3 months ago. The affair was personal. This was something else. This was a man she had been married to for 6 years, building a financial architecture designed to carry weight she had never been told about, using a law firm, 2 shell companies, and the cover of a new job title to do it. She turned off the shower. She dried off. She looked at herself in the bathroom mirror for a moment. The dark circles, the set of her jaw, the eyes of a woman who had moved past hurt into something cleaner and more focused. She got dressed and went to work. Portia took one look at her in the locker room and said nothing for a full minute. Then, "Talk to me, not here. After shift." Betsey considered it. She had been carrying this alone for 3 weeks, and the weight of it was starting to affect her concentration, which was the one thing she could not afford. After shift, she said. They met in the parking lot at 8 p.m. Betsey sat on the hood of her car and talked for 20 minutes. She told Portia about Felicia, about the shell companies, about the 2 LLCs and the 4 properties in the Tempe law firm. She did not tell her about Han Ju-Lee because there was nothing to tell about Han Ju-Lee, nothing she could explain cleanly anyway. Portia listened to all of it. When Betsey finished, Portia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Betsey, this is beyond a cheating husband. I know. This sounds like fraud. I know. You need a lawyer. I know that too." Portia looked at her steadily. "How are you this calm?" Betsey looked at the Phoenix skyline in the distance. The lights of the city doing what they always did, glittering, indifferent, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with what was happening at ground level. "Because if I stop being calm," she said, "I'll have to feel how angry I actually am. And I can't do that yet. I have to finish finding things first." Portia nodded slowly. "What do you need from me? Nothing right now. I just needed to say it out loud to someone who wasn't going to panic. I'm panicking internally." "I know. Thank you for keeping it internal." Han Julie knocked on her door on a Wednesday evening. She opened it and looked at him. He was in a dark jacket, no tie. In his eyes there was something she hadn't seen before. Not urgency exactly, but its careful cousin. "Can I come in?" he said. She looked at him for a moment. Then she stepped back from the door. He came inside. He stood in her entryway and looked at the kitchen table, the legal pad, the printed documents, the pen with the cap off. "You need to stop," he said. She crossed her arms. "Excuse me, the financial records you've been pulling. The LLC registrations, the property search." He met her eyes. "You need to stop following that trail." The room was very still. "How do you know what I've been looking at?" she said. Her voice was completely level. He didn't answer that. "Han Julie," she said his name deliberately, watching his face. "How do you know what I've been looking at?" "Because I know what's at the end of it," he said. "And the people at the end of it are not people who wait for problems to come to them." She stared at him. "Are you threatening me?" "No." Something moved through his face, a kind of controlled frustration, like a man trying to explain something important through a language barrier that had nothing to do with language. "I am telling you that you have walked to the edge of something that has nothing to do with your husband's affair, and the people on the other side of that edge have already noticed your name." The air in the room changed. She felt it, the specific chill of a statement. She had spent 11 years in an ER. She knew the difference between someone performing alarm and someone delivering a diagnosis. This was a diagnosis. "Say that again," she said quietly. "Your name came up," he said. "In a conversation it should never have appeared in. I've handled it. But you need to stop pulling the financial thread." She looked at him for a long time, the legal pad on her kitchen table, the printed documents. 3 weeks of careful, methodical work spread out in the light of her kitchen. Then she said, "Who are you actually?" He held her gaze. "Someone who needs you to be safe more than he needs you to think well of him." The sentence sat between them. She had not heard anything that honest in 8 months. Longer, maybe. She looked at this man standing in her entryway who had carried her groceries and sat on his front steps in the dark and just told her the truth at the cost of whatever she might think of him. She said, "Sit down." He sat. She went to the kitchen and made 2 cups of coffee and brought them back and sat across from him and said, "Tell me what you know. All of it," he told her. Not everything. There were parts of his world that would take more than one evening to explain and more than one conversation to earn the right to share. But he told her enough. The company, the other side of the company, the network that operated underneath legitimate Phoenix business the way water moves under dry ground, invisible until it surfaces somewhere, inconvenient. He told her that Chadwick had not built the arrangement himself, that it had come with the CEO position, inherited from the man before him, and that Chadwick had either not understood what he was agreeing to or had understood, and decided the money was worth the risk. He told her that the network used Nelson Logistics' shipping infrastructure to move things that didn't appear on any manifest, that the shell companies she had found were partially funded through this arrangement. Chadwick skimming from both sides, building his exit with money that belonged to people who kept very precise accounts. He told her that when her name appeared in their system, flagged by a data monitor connected to the LLC registration address she had searched, he had redirected it, buried it under 3 layers of misdirection that would make her look like an automated legal search, not a woman at a kitchen table connecting dots at 2 a.m. He'd told her all of this in the same even voice he used for everything, watching her face the way she had watched patients, reading, assessing, ready to adjust if something landed wrong. Nothing landed wrong. She listened to every word with her coffee in both hands and her eyes steady, and her mind moving through it the way it moved through a complex triage, sorting, prioritizing, identifying what needed immediate attention and what could wait. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Chadwick wasn't just cheating, she said. No, he was scared of them. Yes, so the financial exit, the condo, the shell companies. That wasn't about leaving me for someone else. That was about having somewhere to run before they decided he was a liability. Han Julie looked at her. Yes, she sat with that. 6 years of marriage, and the man had been building a trapdoor the whole time, not because he stopped loving her, maybe, but because he was a frightened man who had gotten in too deep and chosen self-preservation over everything else. It didn't make it better, but it made it make sense in the way that ugly things sometimes did when you finally saw their full shape. You scrubbed my name, she said. Yes, without telling me. I didn't have time to ask permission. She looked at him across her kitchen table. That's either the most presumptuous thing anyone has ever done for me, or the most decent, she paused. I haven't decided which. It can be both, he said. She almost smiled. He saw it. She called Felicia the next morning and told her everything. The shell companies, the network, the financial exit plan. She left out Han-Ju Lee's name and the specifics of how she knew about the network. What Felicia needed was the truth about what her role had been in Chadwick's architecture, and that truth was damaging enough on its own. Felicia was silent for a long time after Betsey finished. Then she said, "He used my name on the car registration, yes. If this goes legal, you're either a victim or an accomplice, depending on how the story gets told," Betsey said. "I want you to be a witness. I want you to give my lawyer everything, every receipt, every message, every reservation. You document your side and I document mine, and together we give him nowhere to stand." "Betsey," Felicia's voice was unsteady. "Why are you helping me? I was with your husband." "You were lied to by my husband," Betsey said. "There's a difference. And you came to find me when you didn't have to. That means something." A long exhale on the other end. "What do you need?" "Everything," Betsey said. Starting today, Chadwick came home on a Thursday evening to find Betsey in the kitchen making dinner. 1 plate. He registered this without commenting. She had been making 1 plate for 2 weeks, and he had said nothing, which told her everything about how present he actually was in this house. He sat at the kitchen table. He talked about his week, a contract in Tucson, a board meeting that ran long. She listened and nodded and passed him the salt when he reached for it. Then she said, very calmly, "How's the condo on Via Solano?" He went completely still. She looked at him with the eyes she used when a patient was about to tell her the truth because they had run out of alternatives. She said, "I'm not asking because I want a fight. I'm asking because I want to understand what you were building, and whether you were planning to tell me before you finished building it or after." Chadwick looked at her. The expensive suit. The second phone face down on the table. The face of a man who had been running in 4 directions and had just looked up to find someone standing calmly in the middle of all of them. "Betsey, I know about Felicia," she said. "I know about Meridian Sunset Holdings and Sunstate Capital Ventures. I know about the routing irregularities in the last 2 quarters. She paused. "And I know about the people who funded the condo. You should lawyer up, Chadwick. Not just for the divorce, for the other thing." His face went the color of old paper. She stood up. She said, "I want you out by the weekend." Then she went upstairs. She heard the front door close 20 minutes later. She sat on the edge of the bed and put her face in her hands and let herself feel it. All of it, the grief and the anger and the strange hollow relief of a thing finally being over. She cried for about 7 minutes. Then she washed her face and went to sleep. 6 weeks later, a lawyer had handled the paperwork. Chadwick had quietly cooperated with a federal inquiry in exchange for reduced exposure, and Felicia had submitted 3 months of documentation that left no room for interpretation. Chadwick lost the CEO position. He lost the condo. He lost the version of himself he had been so carefully constructing. Betsey did not feel sorry for him. She felt something more complicated than sorry. She moved on. It was a Sunday morning in early spring when she finally asked him the real question. She was on her back patio with coffee. Han-Ju Lee was in his garden, which had been tended every Sunday for 3 years and would apparently continue to be. She watched him for a moment in the clean morning light. "You scrubbed the financial trail," she said. He paused, stood, looked at her. "How much of what I found was real?" "All of it," he said. "I just made sure no one could follow it back to you." She nodded slowly. "Tell me who you are. Real answer this time." He set down his tools, he walked to the fence, and he told her. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she looked at him for a long moment. "Okay," she said. He looked at her. "That's it? You kept me safe when you had no obligation to. You told me the truth when I asked for it. You sat on your front steps in the middle of the night because I was on my floor." She paused. "I don't know what we are yet, but I know what you've been." He was very still. She said, "I have a rule. I have to be legally divorced before I have coffee with a man." He said, "That's a reasonable rule." The paperwork finalized Thursday. He looked at her. She lifted her mug. "This is my second cup. You want one?" He came around the fence for the first time in 3 years. Not through a gate. There wasn't one. He just came around it, unhurried, like a man who had been waiting for a door to open and was not going to rush now that it had. He sat beside her on the patio steps. She handed him a mug without making it a moment. He took it without making it a moment. They sat in the Phoenix morning and did not say anything for a while. The sky was doing what Phoenix skies did, unreasonably beautiful, completely unbothered by whatever was happening below it. Then Betsey said, "I set 2 plates this morning out of habit." Han Julie looked at her sideways. "Next time, let me know before you cook." She turned to look at him. "You cook?" "I've had 3 years to learn what you make on weeknights." She stared at him, and then she laughed. He smiled beside her. She leaned back on her hands and looked at the morning, and thought about all that led to this very moment. Then she picked up her coffee and let it go. If this story hit you somewhere real, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, drop a comment,